apart and aside from the daily horrors which are on our screens and on the news platforms and so on. We want to try and think more strategically, even after the horrors, the surprise of what happened on October the 7th. What can be achieved? If so, how? And we want to enlighten all of us as to what the options are on the table. Has horror perhaps opened up new solutions? If so, what are they? How will they be achieved? We want to hear as many views as possible from those gathered here. From wherever you are, we'll get nowhere close to a way forward probably, but we will get an idea of the kind of options which should be being considered at some point if there are any talks or discussions underway. So that's the principle of why we're doing this for the Mariam Forum. And I'd like to open with Yossi Vardi, and I'm going to introduce all the panelists on the platform as I go to them. Yossi Vardi, you're an entrepreneur, you're a tech entrepreneur from Israel. You've been around, you've, I think, formed 85 companies. Give us your idea as a member of the Jewish community from Israel as to what you think is possible.
This is a very tough question.
That's why I'm asking it.
And maybe in a way of background, I was involved in trying, sometimes succeeding, forging peace between Israel and its neighbors since '78, when we negotiated with Egypt, and my role was to negotiate the oil part of the agreement. '93, the Palestinians, '93, '94, the Jordanians, where I dealt with the economic part, '96 with the Syrians, and the results are mixed, as you know. We score well with Jordan and Egypt. Since the peace agreement, no Egyptian, Jordanian, or Israeli mother had to shed tears for their kids in these three countries because of a conflict. And this, I think, is a major, major, major accomplishment. This is the accomplishment number one, that young lives are being kept. We didn't do well with Syria. Rabin, like Sadat, gave their life for the attempt of forging peace. Right now, the mood in Israel is traumatic. All of us, you have a country in a trauma, and you say not to talk about the issues of the day, but I must say one thing. There is totally consensus in Israel on one thing, that until the hostages are coming back, teaching to us humanitarian things is not relevant. I know it's harsh, but I don't want to go what was happened, etc. The whole country is united in the approach to the destiny of the hostages, and everybody who is trying to find solution have to take this into the equation. This is the one thing which should be in the equation. Other than that...
But could I ask you, Yossi, as a former negotiator, can you see anywhere at the moment where there could be some form of common ground to at least get together and speak?
First of all, if you look for common ground, you have to talk to Sharon. Sharon is part of a Palestinian-Israeli NGO, which is called Common Ground. But to go to the issue, what can you do? I tell you what I learned. In this almost 50 years. Number one, peace is not done between countries. Peace is being done by leaders. Number two, in all the peace agreement, we always had some third party which acts as an honest broker, mainly the United States. We saw the commitment of number of leaders, a number of Secretary of States, which were very active. So the mechanism is very important. Before you have the idea, the mechanism, who is sitting around the table, what is the attitude? Number three, you have to build trust. You have to build trust, and in order to build trust, you have to get the people sit with each other. Now, building trust between Israel and the Hamas, I think this is, nobody even think it's a good idea after all the atrocities of the Hamas. So You ask me what are the prerequisites? I don't think we can, until the Hamas is controlling part of the scene, I don't think anything will come out.
But what about the Abraham Accords,
The Abraham,
which were developing a new relationship between Israel
Yeah,
and
but-
the Gulf states and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia?
this is very good, but again, we have to understand that in the last 2,000 years, not a single bullet was exchanged between Israel and the Gulf. So to do peace between Israel and the Gulf was easier than to do peace with Egypt, for instance, where we had the Yom Kippur War. The last point I want to make before I consume the time of everybody else is for the last year, I was very pessimistic. I'm still very pessimistic. There are a number of friends of mine here, and they know that I was always a very optimistic human being. This gun. But in the last few days, I thought about the following thing, that maybe psychologically, trauma is kind of forcing you to give away your former thinking and to try to think fresh. If you see what happened in Europe, 9 years after Germany fighting with Russia and the UK and conquering France, et cetera, with all the things which happened, they created the Council for Coal and Steel. Few years afterward, they created the Common Market, and then they created the ECU, the EC. So maybe a miracle will happen, and all of us will come to the conclusion that we have to find a solution. Now the solution, the principles of the solution are known already for 40 years.
But is Oslo still alive? Is the Oslo peace agreement?
Oslo, the interesting thing is with Oslo, the current government is saying Oslo was very bad, etc., but they are not walking away from Oslo. So Oslo, maybe its prestige went down, but it still serves as part of the current arrangement, which enabled the Palestinians and Israel to have some kind of relationship. Well, I would like to say the following. In my book, any solution must have the issue of two states. And I think that should you say yes with the end, you know?
Sama will come to you in a moment.
Yeah, we have to have two states. We have to agree on the two states. It's not easy. There is arguments about land, about return. We know the right of return. We know the issues. But if the leaders will sincerely to create peace, and if the public, less the extremists from both sides, will support the notion, it may happen. I don't think it will be very fast, but I don't think that we should give it up. The probability which it will happen today, it looks to me much lower than it was 2 months ago or 2 years ago. But if you ask what are the solutions, this is the solution. It's not out the box, it's very much in the box, but things in the box are also can work.
We'll talk about the two-state solution. Thanks for making it clear your view at the moment, Yossi. Let's go to Sama Khoury, please. You are chair of the Palestinian Electric Company. You are director of the Palestine Investment Forum. Can you give me your view from the Palestinian side? And I saw you nodding agreement with Yossi a moment ago.
I think the only way forward is a two-state solution. And I said for my Israeli friend, why? Because if you don't want to have a two-state solution, you'll have a one-state solution. One-state solution means Israel will not have a Jewish majority. And this is something I always tell my friends, that two-state solution is the only way forward. Now, unfortunately, Oslo, 30 years, and this man, like many other friends of ours, have tried very hard since Oslo to get a peace deal going on. We didn't succeed at all. More than 15,000 lives have been lost on both sides since then. Many lives have been hurt. And unfortunately, the last incidents from both sides, we have to pray for the deaths on both Israeli and Palestinian. We are suffering. All of us are suffering. You are suffering. So we have to move forward. You always say, let's think outside the box. So I think now
Well, you have to ask if the box still exists.
No, I think it still exists. Let me say why. It's true, Abraham Accords didn't get us anything because the Gulf is so far away.
But it did move a process forward.
Yes, but let me go on. We have the big elephant in the room is Saudi Arabia. If you ask any Israeli politician today, he's willing to move if Saudi Arabia is on the table. You heard what did yesterday the foreign minister say here. I'm sure all of you heard it. He said, we are willing to normalize with Israel if we give Palestinian their right. What does the Palestinian right means? That Palestine, first, number one, a member of the United Nations. Number two, we agree on a two-state solution as the way forward. Then we sit around the table with all the regional players. This is the way forward. This is not thinking outside the box.
But the kingdom made very clear it would only go ahead with the Abraham Accords and allow Israel to recognize it if there is a two-state solution. That is a conditionality.
Correct.
Is that achievable?
In my opinion,
I'm asking you.
I think with this Israeli government, no. I'm talking now their side. But I think after what happened, all the Israelis have to realize the only way to have peace in this region is to give the Palestinian their state.
So it requires a de-radicalization of the Israeli leadership. That's what you're saying.
I'm not interfering with Israel.
I'm not asking you to interfere. I'm asking you to reflect your opinion.
Samer, may I?
Let me just get an answer to my question first.
Okay, I think many of the radical Israeli friends who have seen what happened will want this Israeli government to go out tomorrow. How long that will take, they have to decide. I cannot decide.
All right. Yossi. Microphone, please, Yossi.
Just one little correction. I think it will not be correct, neither fair, to put all the onus on the Israeli government. I think the failure to create the two states is owned by the leaders of
both sides,
and the neighbors, etc. It's much more complicated just to say the Israelis didn't agree.
Agreed.
Let me go to another Jewish voice, Martin Sorrell.
Yeah.
You run your own PR and advertising
Not
company.
PR, you got that wrong. Anyway, but get your research.
Tell us for once what you are doing, Martin.
Telling stories.
You need to change your website. But anyway, Martin, let's not distract it with you having a go at the moderator. I can have a go at you. Let's
trying to redress the balance. Go
Thank you. Yossi, you have to leave, I know. So thank you very much indeed. Martin, what's your view? You're very much a presence internationally about where the solution could be.
Well, my childhood friend, Simon Sharma, who's also Jewish, and I spent a large amount of time together. And he coined a phrase recently, talked about it. It wasn't his phrase. He did quote the source. I called it a war of two rights. So you're dealing with an extremely difficult situation because both sides have extremely good arguments to justify it. But there are certain dynamics here that have to be dealt with, and we've touched on some of them. The first is the ultimate solution, two-state solution. And that's where we have to get to. But there are certain sort of preconditions for this. Changes. Yossi mentioned lack of leadership. I watched the film called Golda on Netflix recently. If anybody hasn't seen it, they should go and see it. And it reminded me very much of what's happening today. I mean, if you look at the dynamics there, you had strong political leadership at that time. You had very strong diplomatic leadership, because it's not just political leadership, it's diplomacy too, in the form of Henry Kissinger, who, as Neil Ferguson at one of our dinners here pointed out again, it was remarkable that within a very short period of time, he managed to secure agreement in an equally difficult situation. So there has to be political leadership and diplomatic leadership, and there have to be changes on both sides, on both the Israeli side with Netanyahu, and on the Palestinian side and the Hamas side. There has to be changes in leadership and a more, as we were talking before, you used the phrase technocratic leadership in the case of Palestine, and maybe the Hamas leadership being located elsewhere. The one, I spent a lot of time with Yossi recently talking, and he is in a very, or was in a very depressed state. I've never seen him. He raised the issue of what's been happening in the West Bank with the Orthodox Jews and the settlements, Haredi Jews on the West Bank, and we talked a lot about that. So there's the extremist side on the Israeli side too that has to be dealt with. But the one piece of good news over the last few weeks that I see is the position of Saudi Arabia. So this is another one of the dynamics here. The Arab communities, not just Saudi Arabia, but the other Arab communities, again, which we discussed, have to play a key role in negotiating this settlement. I mean, it's obviously there's a question about ceasefire, there's a question about hostage exchange. I don't know how many of the hostages are left, sadly. Huh? We don't know what the figure is. I don't know whether anybody has any information. So these are all these dynamics that have to be dealt with. I'm just going to add one further point. When I look at it sort of globally, what's been happening in Europe with emigration and immigration, I must say from the point of view of the Jewish community, say in the UK, there is a very high level of concern. This is not just an Israeli problem. This is not just a Gaza problem. This is a global problem. You know, there are 2 billion Muslims on the planet. There are 16.3 million Jews. I don't want to be portentous about it, but I think that what we're witnessing in the Middle East, maybe I've been talking too much to Yossi, is the beginning
of?
Well, these shudders, these waves, are not just waves that wash on that particular shore or that particular part of the world. These are forces that are building outside the Middle East and elsewhere, and that really worries me.
And we haven't begun to talk about Iran. There are so many factors.
Well, there are three problems that we face globally. One is US-China, one is Russia-Ukraine, and the third is Iran. People used to laugh at me up till about, well, I can remember September, October, before October the 7th, terrible events of October the 7th. They used to laugh when I named that as the third problem. But you're right. I mean, that's the issue. And there's a wide range of views about it. But this is a global issue.
And the level of the reason I raise Iran, of course, is the level of control and instruction they want to give to Hezbollah and also to the Houthis, who've now opened a new front on the Red Sea, and who knows where this is going to develop.
Well, I mean, the risk is that this conflict metastasizes in the Middle East. You know, from a PR point of view, Hamas is much better organized. I mean, it's one of the tropes has been that the media are controlled by the Jews. If that is the case, we're doing a dramatically bad job of controlling it. And Hamas, actually, really interestingly, if you go back and look at some of the information that's been propagated, Hamas has been planning this for
3 years.
I would say 10, 15 years. I'm not talking about the attack. I'm talking about the public relations sort of infrastructure. It has been in existence. It was a very interesting program by an Israeli ad executive coming back 10 years ago, where he discusses this. So this has been in the works for a long time. And what worries me is, you know, we're all focused on the region, but this is really a global issue.
All right, let's leave it there. Let's get another view from, how can I put it the other side, from Kuwait, from Mohammed Al-Ghanim. Mohammed, you run a large company in Kuwait. What is your view of where we are, what the potential is for finding some kind of level of common ground and coexistence? And where's Sharon? I'll come to you in a moment, Sharon, after what Yossi said. But what's your view from Kuwait?
Right. So thank you for your time. I think the important point here is to ensure, if we actually want to pick up on your invitation, which is to come up with ideas that
Yes,
could
please.
potentially be galvanized.
Yes, please.
We need to dissect what we're talking about right now. And what we've been doing, I think, with due respect, is we've been scratching the surface. There are two distinct level or layers that we need to really make sure that we are uncovering. The first is, on the one hand, the Israeli realpolitik, if you will, is really strongly traumatized by the events of October 7th. It still is. It's still trying to sort of galvanize itself and understand what exactly happened, how this happened, why the level of failure was allowed by the various security apparatuses in Israel to allow for this to happen. On the other hand, which is something we haven't discussed for a very a long time here, is you have a path-dependent approach to the Palestinians who have been saying that for 75 years we basically have not had our right to self-determination. We are not able to announce ourselves as a nation. And as a consequence, what other options do we have? You mention the Abraham Accords, and I think this has exacerbated the Israeli-Palestinian problematique much more than we believe. Because from the Palestinian perspective, they believe that as a result of these new bilateral relationships that are going on, the core issue of Palestine is now being relegated as being secondary. And this is a very important nuance that we need to address quite critically. The element here, if we're talking about this conflict in general and what solutions do we have, if I'll start with Israel on the one hand, there's quite a dichotomy that we were discussing to begin with. On the first, if you ask many Israelis, potentially even the ones in the room, I'm quite confident, and you'll allow me to speak for some of you, that most of them will actually say, we do not support the Netanyahu government. But these same level of people will say, we support the war in Gaza because of what we saw. So there's quite a dichotomy in terms of trying to understand the real current ethos of the Israeli politics on the one hand. Bibi Netanyahu, I'll be far more undiplomatic if you'll allow me, has been since his inception opposed to the idea of a two-state solution. In 1993, Bibi Netanyahu wrote an article that was published in the New York Times entitled Peace in Our Time with a question mark, in which he obliterated the idea of an independent Palestinian state. This person is at the helm of the Israeli political reality as we speak of right now. This is very important. He has also created quite, I would imagine, what many Israelis would classify as probably one of the most far-right governments in the history of Israel. Imagine, Bibi Netanyahu has been in power for more years than Golda Meir, than Ben Gurion, than some of the key people that were really pillars to establishing the Israeli state. This is a stark reality that we cannot overlook. On the Palestinian end, we have now seen a clear break between two elements. The first is the Palestinian Authority, since Yasser Arafat, has been personified in one individual. There is no leadership to succeed Yasser Arafat except, now with Mahmoud Abbas. Mahmoud Abbas seems to be, and even if you ask some of the Palestinians, I'm sure they would agree, is more interested in getting international recognition to his position as being the sole leader of the Palestinian Authority more than he is in negotiating peace and identifying what is going on with the Gaza Strip. Where do we have a third way with the Palestinians, and where do we have a third way with the Israelis? The left in Israel is shattered. There is no more left. There is no more. We're talking now, there are people that are actually, and I'm not sure that this is a bad idea to potentially discuss given recent polls, that Marwan Barghouti might be a new third way for the Palestinian Authority. And this is somebody who is actually convicted and is in jail. So the realities of leadership are not so easy for us to take into consideration. I'll conclude by saying this, if you don't mind. Then I'll need someone to help me with my microphone, is to say this. Peace can only be achieved if the position is ripe. You cannot have peace ensuing at a time of a conflict where there are people that are agonizing on the state of Israel, and there are over 23,000 people, if I may say so myself, that is nearing genocide in Gaza. These are not conditions that can happen very easily. And I think I would agree with Yossi, but he left, that one of the biggest issues that you have with convoluted problems, such as the Israeli-Palestinian one, is you need an international arbitrator. Why? Because you need somebody to enforce the deal. There are incentives that come in with peace. And unless you have an international arbitrator who has the trust, and who has the capacity to say, I am holding you accountable to what you've signed on to. It's the reason why Egypt and Israel still have a peace today. Let's not forget that both parties are being incentivized as a result of that. And the United States holds true to that. Is that going to be the Qataris? Is that going to be the Saudis? Is that going to be the European Union? We can have a debate about that. But without that, an acceptable international arbiter, you cannot effectively deploy this new peace process.
Thank you. Who's got the microphone over there? Because I'd like to get a microphone to Sharon.
Am I going to get?
Yes, I am, Eric.
Yeah.
I was just checking there was a microphone. Could you give it to Sharon? I'm going to come to her after Eric Cantor. Eric Cantor, you're joining us, former Republican for Virginia, House of Representatives, and former Majority Leader in the House as well, up until 2014. Where do you think the United States is in this? We have to sort of speculate about which president we're talking about here. But let's just talk about the United States' influence and whether the US matters at all, given the problems that have been received by the Secretary of State and others going to Israel.
Well, first of all, absolutely, the United States matters. But let me just respond and sort of go to the subject of how do we set the table for peace. I mean, I think that's where you want this to head. And I think number one is to respond to any suggestion about genocide right now. We've got to make sure we're distinguishing between purposeful killing on such a massive scale on October 7th of innocent men, women, and children and babies versus the collateral damage of war. Now, yes, it's a humanitarian crisis. I think all of us feel and our hearts rage to see what happened to the victims on October the 7th and the hostages. And we also do the same thing for the innocent Palestinian people. Okay, so I think we can all agree on that construct. There is a difference between purposeful killing. Under no circumstances would any government of any country ever sit still when that happens to their people. So that's number one.
Debate?
Number two.
Yeah, we're moving.
I just have one question.
So no.
Hold on. What happened with Rwanda for a moment?
Let me just.
Was that genocide?
Let me just speak to this.
And was it purposeful? And did we ignore it?
So
you put it on the agenda. Just leave it there for the moment.
Right. So let's get back to how do we, and there's been a lot of discussion about leadership here, and I fully agree that we need leadership and partners for peace in leadership. And over the decades, the issue has been that yes, there's been a position taken by the Israeli government that they won't negotiate with the Palestinian Authority, they won't negotiate with Hamas. Look what has happened. I mean, there need to be and even the Biden administration, and you asked what is the U.S. position. The Biden administration has said that the Palestinian leadership needs to be revamped and revitalized. Hamas has to go. That is one of the prerequisites of, I think, a path towards peace. Hamas and the terrorist mentality has to go. Any Palestinian Authority leadership has to insist on no incitement, no support of terrorism, and from the international donor community, no corruption. And that needs to take place. Now, yes, Israel's political situation is in a mess. I think we all know that. And we saw what happened with the judicial reform debate and the protests on the streets in that democracy. They've got to straighten that out. Yossi's left, so I can't speak. I'm not an Israeli about that and where that should head. But currently, the government is united. The people are united. You heard Yossi. The people are united and want the hostages back, which brings me to the third piece. That has to happen. And then where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? I think, and I am actually optimistic, because I do take some of the suggestion that this horrible, horrible incident on October 7th does maybe make it and give us an opportunity to see. Look what the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has done. They have not gone in and influenced much out front in the public debate right now. They see what's going on. The United Arab Emirates, in a similar fashion, has said, we are going to continue to signal towards normalization, that we need to make sure we're all united. And I think everyone is united against Hamas. And brings me to the last piece, it's about Iran. We cannot forget about that piece, because it is Iran's sponsorship of its proxies that right now is spreading throughout the region. And if we can't get control of that, we are going to see a spread of this. And it won't just affect that region, it will affect all of us.
Thank you, Eric. Can we go to Sharon, please? Because I'm coming to you because of what you represent and what Yossi Vardi said. Simon, are you able to, could you stand up, please? And just introduce yourself, please.
Is it on?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Okay, so I'm Sharon Rosen. I'm an Israeli citizen. I've lived in Jerusalem for over 40 years. And I work for Search for Common Ground. That's the reason why Yossi said
Indeed.
that. I'm actually the Director of Religious Engagement globally, but I did co-direct the office in Jerusalem for 10 years before that with a Palestinian co-director. Both of us women, and we both actually worked very well together.
Where is the common ground at the moment?
There is common ground. I would say, actually, following on this idea of women and noticing that there are no women here on the panel, we have been working.
That's a fair criticism. We did invite several. They weren't able to come.
Okay, forgive you. We focus on process. And I would say three things, actually. I would say that, first of all, I agree totally with Yossi that we are all traumatized, both the Palestinians and the Israelis. And we have to bring in trauma healing first, I think, in order to help people to open their hearts a bit. I would also say that I agree with him and all of you that it has to come, the change will come from the leadership, but it can only come if the people are behind them. We know that in Oslo, it was a very exclusive process. There were no religious people there with very strong attachments to the West Bank. And because it was not an inclusive process, we had the spoilers coming in immediately and trying to stop it. So we have to have an inclusive process here. We have to bring in women. I've been working with religious leaders in Israel, Muslim and national religious, for the last 8 years. Since October the 7th, I am very disappointed to say that the men have regressed back into their positions, but the women that we have been working with have come out, and they are running programs like joint neighborhood watches to prevent violence in mixed villages, mixed towns. They are writing pieces which are being published in Muslim, Jewish, and international news media, talking about the absolute need for compassion for both sides, because in Israel, you can't talk about compassion for the other side. If you talk about compassion for the Palestinians in Gaza, you can lose your job. You can be thrown out. You can be suspended as a principal from a school. So this voice has to come, but it's got to come in a way that is not aggressive, that gives empathy, that recognizes the need for compassion on both sides.
Can I just underscore, that's the kind of voice we're trying to get in this gathering here for the next hour. We've been running for about 40 minutes so far, but I just want to pick up a point, 2 points you made. First of all, you said, you used a very interesting phrase, the situation must be ripe. Mm-hmm. How do we get to a ripe situation? And secondly, you urged international arbitration. Now, you've put two things on the agenda there. Bear in mind that there are others who have points of view, but is there anything you want to add about a ripe situation for discussion about who would do it?
I think who would, on the Israeli and the Palestinian side, I think at this point, one of the things, I'll just conclude by saying this. The reason the Oslo Accords worked was because they were first negotiated by those who were out of the political spectrum. So track 2 diplomacy is often very effective in coming to a particular way of where we are. Now, Oslo, I think, has failed as a process. That being
It's dead.
It's dead. That being said, it doesn't negate the fact that the discussion was started at the time. And I will just say one thing, which I would like to remind everyone here. At the time when the Israeli government knew that these negotiations were happening in different areas, I will remind everyone that the Palestinian Authority at that time, or the PLO at the time, was designated a terrorist organization.
Right, what I'd like to do is get 2 or 3 more views from all of you, because this is a workshop, it is a brainstorming. I'm not going to be able to talk to everyone immediately, but let's at least hear 2 or 3 views. Can we go to the lady? Is it the lady? Yes, please. And the second microphone. Where's the second microphone, Mitch? Okay, yes, please. Here, to the gentleman here. Please go ahead and just introduce yourself. And can I ask you, in the interest of time, can you be as brief as possible? Because then I can get as many voices, we can get a plurality of views from all sides.
Hi, I'm Noah Gaffney. I'm an Israeli citizen, and I'm also part of the founding team of the Global Shapers community, the WEF's network of young people. And so having seen both sides on social media, I want to understand, how do we avoid this impasse? Because on the Israeli side, we are obviously touching into the trauma of October 7th, but the intergenerational trauma that my ancestors have experienced. And also on the Palestinian side, I would say, there's the watermelon kind of things happening where people are saying, actually, no, this is going to make us stronger. This is going to create a movement. And so, I appreciate the idea of healing trauma, but how do we do this en masse, not just within the Israeli and the Palestinian communities, but globally?
All right, you've raised a question there. Let's store it for the moment. Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason Myers. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I want to precondition what I'm about to say by raising the possibility that I'm either paranoid or naive. And I haven't heard anybody raise these issues. And I think if they are raised, it may include additional problems that have to be addressed in order for a peace solution to occur. One, I remember Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin like it was yesterday. I may not look that old, but I remember it. Number 2, Henry Kissinger would say that there are economic forces at work that might find peace counterproductive. That's what he would say.
Peace counterproductive.
He would say that there are economic forces at work that make peace counterproductive. That's what he would say if he were here today. What I would say is that, and it's been said before, is that it doesn't matter whose bullets are being fired so long as they're being fired.
Okay, let's pause. You've made your point, please.
Hello, my name is Victor Willi from the Middle East Institute, Switzerland. I just want to address your point, sir, because you said Hamas has to go. And on a personal level, I emphasize with you and I know where you're coming from. But on a practical and a policy level, this statement is just not realistic, and it's not going to be a good policy prescription, because anybody who knows Hamas, and I worked on the Muslim Brotherhood for many years. I was in Egypt 3 years during the revolution, interviewing the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas originated from the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is a social and religious reform movement with deep roots in society. So a conservative estimate would be that maybe 10% of all Palestinians in Gaza are from Hamas. That gives you still 230,000 people. Hamas is responsible for garbage collection, for taxes, for bakeries, for everything. There is no coming by of Hamas in Gaza. So, we also have to differentiate between Hamas, the political wing, and Hamas, the military wing, the Al-Qassam brigades. If you,
So the point is...
Yeah, just one more point. Ismail Haniyeh, Nasrallah, they were informed a few hours before that attack started that this was going to happen. So nobody knew about this. Haniyeh didn't know about it, according to multiple reports, even in credible journals. So we need to start differentiate, bring some sort of common sense into this. We need to focus on the Al-Qassam brigades, not Hamas broadly, because you can't get rid of them, you know. Otherwise, you have to exterminate 10% of...
All right, okay, we've got the message. Anyone else want to come in, please? The gentleman at the back, please. And who's got the microphone here?
I got it.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please. Go ahead.
My name is Charles Okochu. I'm actually based in the U.S., and I'm not Jewish. One question I did have was, no one here has mentioned Russia and its role in this conflict. And if you're going to solve this conflict, you do need Russian involvement to help solve the conflict.
Thank you.
I'd like to get some.
All right, please here.
Sorry, hi, I'm Sam from New Zealand, one of these countries that sits firmly in the middle. And I guess I have a question for all of you.
Middle of what?
Well, I don't have a side. I agree for both sides, as our country does. But I have a question for you all, which is that it starts with talking. You have to start talking. So who is the person whom you all trust to engage in that conversation? Who is the intermediary?
Is there anyone?
Is there anyone? Yeah.
Very quickly, does anyone want to volunteer?
Well, you see, and I worry about this.
A name, anyway, not you.
I worry about. I worry about this because, you know, anytime there's history has shown, like for instance, back I think it was 2006, when the international community got together, and you mentioned you need an arbiter. The United Nations came down, passed, I think it was Resolution 1706, and this had to do with Lebanon, and this had to do with Hezbollah, and this had to do with the fact that. The desire was, on the international community standpoint, didn't want Hezbollah to arm up again and be a threat to Israel, and they were supposed to stay north of the Litani River. Well, look where that went. I mean, so again, I think it goes back to your point. Yes, you need to find the forum, proper forum that we could see a way forward for discussion, but like you say, it needs to be ripe. Mm-hmm. If we do this too soon, if we force that, whoever we is, you may end up in a worse situation. So I just hesitate to say, well, let's go pick the arbiter, and that will be that. So.
I'm tempted to say, just to add to the discussion, you don't necessarily eat ripe food.
Correct.
Fruit. You actually buy the fruit and then watch it ripen.
That's true.
No, I'm serious about this. In other words, how do you identify a process which could lead to a ripening, which could lead to the kind of thing you put on the agenda?
Release the hostages. That's what you do.
Sure.
That's
okay.
100%.
How about we understand? Sorry, ma'am. I'd just like to interrupt for a second. Two things that I'd like to make, because Jason, is it? Okay, I'll address Jason's point in just a second. I think one of the most important elements that we haven't discussed right now is we need to understand that there is also a continued occupation that is going on, and the level to which it exacerbates this conflict is insurmountable. So this is absolutely important. No, hold on. Just
where's the occupation? In Gaza?
Hold on.
Eric.
Hold on. Just give me one moment, and I'll explain. So what happened in Gaza was the following. The Israeli Realpolitik, from a short history, takes into consideration, Eric, that we unilaterally withdrew from Gaza in 2005. We've actually had a discussion. I'd like you to also call on someone if you don't mind. With the question of, we withdrew from southern Lebanon. What did we get in return? And that is a significant question in terms of how essential the security paradigm is, right? Mm-hmm. But here's the point. When Sharon took the decision to unilaterally withdraw from Gaza, the Palestinian Authority was screaming, do not do it in such a vacuum. It is going to create havoc that you will come to regret. It is so unfortunate that we sit in a forum where we are regretting that decision today.
All right, thank you.
One last point, because I'd like.
Okay, do you want to get more?
But Jason.
My point needs to be answered.
Yeah, I think Jason, have you heard the adage? Money makes war. Yes. So I think war profiteering, particularly with this conflict, is not financial. There's a lot of people on both sides that are profiting from the status quo, whether it's the Palestinians, whether it's the Israelis, whether it's both inside. But I think what I would hope is people like yourself, who obviously are hurting, and like us, who are obviously also hurting, will use this opportunity to say, not in our name as well. There is somebody in there. Can I push you?
There's a poor one over here.
Who is it?
Ronit Avni, if you don't mind. She's sitting right over there. And
Has she got the microphone at the moment?
I don't know.
This gentleman here.
Has he?
Oh, just one moment, please. I knew this would happen. A lot of people want to speak. It's great. But can we just recognize we've got an hour to run, and therefore a lot of this is going to actually be coming forward from you. So just be patient, please. Can we go in the same way that I went to Sharon earlier? The lady there, please.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. It's nice to see some old and familiar faces on this issue. I ran a human rights and media organization out of Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem, working on Palestinian human rights and Israeli human rights issues. I think there are a few things that we have to take into consideration when we talk about waiting for the moment to be ripe. The trends demographically, especially in the Israeli public, I've looked at the trends towards democracy over the last 30 years have been dramatically declining. So the longer we wait demographically in Israel, it's actually moving away from the idea of democracy. So that's number one. Number two, historically, whenever any entity in this region tries to bomb their way to a better political solution, what they get afterwards is worse. And so I want to be very clear, unfortunately, and I'll bore you with examples on that we have to be very careful. I agree with the gentleman who talked about the fact that it would be the equivalent in American terms. I'm not making equivalencies, but the idea that one side could bomb the Republicans out of, or the MAGA Republicans out of America, it doesn't work. And so we have something much more profound that needs to be dealt with, and killing people and all of the civilians that get killed along the way.
Release the hostages.
Of course.
Eric, we've got that message now.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's the second piece. But the third piece is the radicalization that's happening right now that is so profound because of the level of carnage. I have colleagues in Gaza, I have friends whose families are dying of famine and diarrhea, and then of course Israelis who've been killed on October 7th, like Vivian Silver, that many of us worked with. The time is now. So the last piece is about trusted messengers. There are countries that each of the parties does respect. I personally would love to see Germany, Saudi, the UAE, and the UK getting together, perhaps with the individuals doing the second track hostage negotiation, and see how far they can take some of that fringe diplomacy to get creative.
Curious why you didn't suggest the U.S.
I don't think the U.S. is a capable, trusted messenger.
This guy.
Right. What? Just be patient one moment. Can I just invite two of our new guests up on the platform to comment on the kind of things you've been hearing in the last 3 or 4 minutes?
My name is Shmuel Meitar. I'm an Israeli, actually born as a Palestinian. When I was born, the state of Israel didn't exist, and my birth certificate says I'm a Palestinian. Between the Jordan and the sea live 14 million people, 7 million Jews and 7 million Muslims and Arabs. They can never live together in one country. So the only solution is a two-state solution. Now I'll tell you something. I'm personally optimistic that this event will create something. But I can tell you it's like a man and a wife that's getting divorced and they can never agree. Both sides will never agree. If we put them to the table, each one, there'll be a blame game. And we've seen it over the years. There were opportunities, including Yasser Arafat with Ehud Barak in Camp David, including and let's say Rabin was close to it, was assassinated. Ehud Olmert, who was the prime minister, was put in jail because he was about to agree with Abbas on an agreement. These are all events. The two sides will never agree.
How do we get from here to there?
Get the Security Council to enforce a solution.
What about Security Council resolutions and the
No. Enforce, I said. Not make a decision. Decide with sanctions to both sides.
Born a Palestinian, or
That's
is
it.
a Palestinian?
Otherwise, it will never happen.
The United Nations is not a fair playing field.
I didn't say it's fair. Believe me, I know all of that.
Yeah.
I know all of that, but we need... look, we don't have Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger knew to manipulate both sides. He got the peace between the Israelis and the Egyptians. He was a master. I spent a lot of time with him. He knew what to do. We don't have another Henry Kissinger.
What happens about the 700,000 settlers?
Security Council can take care of it. It's
Well, hang on,
half of them, I'll tell you, half of them are ideologic settlers, half of them want better housing. You need to negotiate with them and see it's ideological. I don't want to start suggesting things because it will only create animosity. We need a broker that has the ability to enforce. Otherwise, it won't happen.
And the interest. And the interest to enforce.
I'm interested you put that kind of level of faith in the UN, given...
I didn't put, they have ability to enforce sanctions. Nobody else has it.
All right. Khaled Janahi, you join us from Bahrain. You're a businessman. What's your view of the way things are going? You wrote a book last year about the state of Arabic politics, particularly. This has now come as a shock. It wasn't in your book. But we now have a new reality where so much has gone backwards. What's your overall view?
There was one thing in my book, which you mentioned earlier on, with a waste of the Abrahamic Accord as far as the Israelis and Palestinians are concerned. It's a waste. It's people to people, which is not there. So the Abrahamic Accord, as far as I'm concerned, it's out of the window. I think what I've been listening to, and we expected this to be very passionate, okay? I think Sharon, I was looking forward to David to mention it, but Sharon made it much stronger, the word compassion. If I actually say how many people really have compassion for 550 children being killed in Ukraine from the beginning until now, how many of you will put your hands up? All of us. How many of you will have compassion for the over 10,000 children being killed from 7th of October until now?
I think all of us.
Because of that is the point you made about radicalization. The infant who's been killed, his parents, his granddad, or whatever, have been killed in 10, 15 years, when he comes and he bombs somewhere in Israel or whatever, are we going to say, because he's going to come and say, okay, never again. He's going to use the same words, never again, okay? How are we going to look at that? We're going to say this is a radicalized person, this is a terrorist. I think that is what we want to avoid. In order to avoid that, we have to start from the point where we are today. I think we cannot just say 7th of October. We've got to look before 7th. Why 7th of October happened? There are so many reasons why 7th of October happened. Because I think Eric mentioned the reality of terrorism. But there is something else which arrogance and power avoids the American thinking process and the Israeli thinking process, which is basically the occupation reality. Because if you live in, as a Palestinian, which I'm not, I've been to those places, and to live as one who basically has to travel from A to B, the issue that he has to go through, okay, the lack of dignity which goes away from him, okay, because this young, and I'm not saying this poor guy, the young IDF guy, is doing it because he's been told to do it, to really look down at this person, the way to deal with it. That is where these things, we don't talk about it, okay, and I think we should bring it in. So the issue of who is an honest, and I think I liked what you raised, okay, by not bringing US. I think US has lost it. Because when I look at Admiral Kirby, okay, 14 months ago, coming on TV, crying because, and calling it, okay, genocidal mission of Putin against the Ukrainians, and then he coming 2 weeks ago on TV saying, This is
Well,
this is 10,000. This 10,000.
But again, it's my point originally that there is a real difference between purposeful killing of babies, women, men, children on October 7th and the collateral damage that is occurring at war.
This
There's
is
a
not collateral
difference.
damage.
There
This is not collateral damage. Hold on. I'm sorry. This is not collateral damage.
You mentioned decency.
This is
There's not purposeful. Listen, let's not.
this is
no. I think.
But if they're white babies, it's something else.
Just one moment. Just one moment. Have you got the microphone? Let me hear. Let me hear that on a mic. Let me hear that on a microphone, please.
That is.
Could you just get the microphone to the lady, please?
I was going to continue.
Indeed, we'll come back to you. Just make the point so other people can hear it on the streaming.
Hello, I'm Sarah, and what I was saying is, when it comes to Arabs, we're brown. Our lives don't matter as much. And so when it comes to Ukraine, I'm really sorry, but you're the epitome of why America should not be involved in this conflict. You are the epitome of why America should take a seat and allow other people who actually want peace to take over.
All right, thank you. Let's leave it there for the moment. Right, let me get some other views. Can you take the microphone back to that lady? And we have this gentleman here, please. Martin.
My name is Martin Oliner. I represent the Institute for Peace in the United States. I'm shocked by this whole conversation. I'd like to go back to what your question was to begin with. The question to begin with was, what can we do going forward? Well, the first thing we need to do is not make the same mistakes we have. We have genocide that's occurred in Israel for the first time. The government of Israel has been remiss. The purpose of Israel is not from the river to the sea and listening to the river to the sea. Folks in here don't understand that we are at a war. The people of Israel have had one hope all through their lives, and that is peace. And they've never had a partner during that entire part. That entire time, there's never been a partner. There's nobody in the Palestinian movement who has agreed to ever meet on a peaceful basis. And then you add to it today a genocide of 1,200 people because we gave back Gush Katif. We gave back Gush Katif, and we don't have a border. We don't have a border that we had. This conversation is, in my view, so late, too late, very late. The conversation today should be, how do we not make the same mistakes in rehabilitating Gaza when tons of money are going to go into Gaza? Gaza, we have to understand that Hamas cannot play a role going forward. I appreciate your numbers, but nevertheless, I hope that the world isn't as poor as you represent it to be. Hamas will be destroyed. When this Hamas is destroyed, as America suggests and as Israel is totally united about, there is no Israeli today who doesn't believe that Hamas should be destroyed. In addition to that, let me be clear, there's no Israeli today who believes that the Hezbollah in the north aren't going to be eliminated. You cannot live in a country where you're bombed constantly, where you have 150,000 missiles in each area. Now, I'll answer one other question for you, which I think you've raised, and that is, why has Israel allowed that to happen? It's not sheerly out of arrogance. It's because Israel did not want to go in to Gaza because it knew the collateral damage that it would take. But no country, no one in the world, no America, no Switzerland, no one could live with a terrorist attack killing millions of people, 120,000 people, 12 of just for no reason.
Right. Now, look, what
let me add the thought.
No, I'm going to put my foot down and say, what we're trying to do is move forward. We're trying to look at the Rubik's Cube and say, how do we begin to get some
not make the same mistakes?
Exactly. So you've made your point. Let me go to the lady who does have the microphone, and I'm not going to take it away from you this time.
Yeah, hi. My name is Laura. I just wanted to say that we should all be deeply ashamed that we are still not in a peaceful situation. My father was born in Jaffa in 1943, and he came to Switzerland when he was 18. He built his life here. He actually only told me his story when I was about 20. He never kind of like passed on this trauma to us. And we got to grow up in a very safe and secure and peaceful home. And I don't want to point the finger at anyone. I think we all have to point the finger at ourselves and say, why did we not manage to achieve peace until this day?
That's what we're trying to follow here, trying to find those right moments and right possibilities. Reed, can we come in?
Sure.
Please, microphone here.
I also have.
He has one.
So I think I'm good. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Hey everyone, thank you all so much for this conversation. It's been incredibly powerful. I have 2 points. First, just wanted to mention.
Just explain who you are.
Yes. Okay. I'm a global shaper, so a youth leader within WEF. I run a nonprofit that basically supports local leaders to create more systems change within their communities. So I have 2 points. First of all, I'm a Jewish American. I have 3 grandparents who's lost most of their families in various Jewish persecutions, including the Holocaust. And I am frankly ashamed and disgusted that the sort of genocide that was perpetrated against my ancestors is now basically being perpetrated in the name of Judaism. I think that is absolutely shameful and disgusting. And I think that we need to be able to get past the idea of standing up for Palestine as anti-Semitic. At least in my country, where in the United States, you can lose your job essentially for saying anything negative against Israel. And then the second point, I did want to say something constructive about this conversation, which is how do we create systems change? This is obviously not the only part of the solution, but I think an important part of the solution is there's actually been many people from the civil society community, many women have spoken from the audience, and I think they have excellent ideas, right? They are experts, they're academics, they've been working in this field. I think the problem is that we need more of those people in positions of power, and we can't have people who are motivated by political agendas. And I think that is one really important, simple solution. I do want to say, perhaps one more point or maybe question for the panelists is, I mean, you all are business leaders. I think you're probably told you aren't supposed to be reactive, you're supposed to be proactive as much as possible. Yet it feels like the Israel-Palestine conflict, every single time there's some sort of conflict, some new massacre, it's about how do we react to this particular thing. And I'm wondering, how do we get more proactive? Again, my idea is very much around how do we start providing education, peace-building support, how do we start changing mindsets and skills and giving more empowerment to people within Gaza. And I think that will create grassroots solutions. Of course, it will take generations. There's no easy solution. But I am curious, in your all's minds, how do we create more proactive, long-term solutions to this conflict?
That's what we're trying to do. The question is, how long is?
I don't think we can say that it's going to be as simple as we can get an answer in a year because of one treaty. I think it is generations, but I'm wondering how we can start working towards that process.
Right. Can I ask you to move around, because then you be in some light. I'll come to you in a moment. Who's got the microphone over here? Sorry. Who's got a microphone? Could you move the microphone to the lady in the second row, there, please?
Hello. So my name is Malak. I'm a young global leader with the WEF, and I'm a business person, but here I
Where are you from?
Jordan. I'm Jordanian Iraqi. So I came here with a very good intention, and I highly respect all. And I came with a passion and compassion and kindness. And I always think about the future. So I would love to see and hear, how do you think we can shape the future? I have to mention.
Give us your idea, will you?
Yeah, so first we need to start with the education. And the second is we have to recognize that human dignity and rights, it should be recognized for all. So one life, it should be equal one life, and we need to start this education. Genocide, it always creates more genocide worldwide, so we need to, if both sides, they want to shape the future we want for the generation, you have a whole generation of people who have traumatized, anger, sad, and they just, would have this historical heritage of so much pain and tears. So how do you stop that? It's the future of education.
Is there one specific point?
Education.
Education.
Yes.
Right, thank you. The microphone to the gentleman in front of you here.
Hi, my name is Guido Schmitz-Krummer. I have different roles, but I'm a human. This is my majority of role. I spent 6 years in war areas. I've been bombed. I've been hijacked. I've seen what wars is going on. And I think the first solution should be that all the honorable people here with your influence, you should be ambassador of any person who is in this conflict. Your families, you're sitting in nice warm offices like me as well, and you should take care that no citizen in this conflict should be harmed. And this should be the first thing according to Human Rights Charter of the United Nations, even the US have signed and is doing for. And I think in this space, then you should take your influence and spread it around. And if we all have this impression, if we all have this same values, we make it much more difficult for any extremist, any political leader to not join the mission, because otherwise he would be out. And especially for the US, I would really ask you to not do it with bombs or prerequisites. Take first the humans in the center and then ask where are the stakeholders, what are their interests, and try to talk to them instead of making prerequisites and say, I want to have this and this be first. This is never leading to an end of a conflict and a diplomatic solution. And this we need here very urgent, and at least by tomorrow.
Let's put onto the agenda in the last 20 minutes one particular issue, please. Gaza. 85% of the buildings have been demolished. There are 2.3 million people technically, apart from those who've been killed and who are homeless, who simply have nowhere to go. That's what the UN says very clearly. And I'm putting this on the agenda now because even though it's going to be happening day after day, and it's probably happening at the moment, it's the language we've heard from Jerusalem, which is that they want people in Gaza to make a voluntary move to other locations. The Israeli plan is to thin the population of Gaza. You can see where this is going, the potential for the population of Gaza to be somehow shifted into the Sinai desert. But the Egyptians have said no way at the moment. I say this because I put to you that this is an enormous potential obstacle for any kind of convergence of will towards finding some kind of new agreement, whether it be weeks or months from now. Who has clear ideas about this?
That's not the position of the government. That's the position of the extremists in the government.
Yes.
So, don't, you just quoted the government, and I beg you.
I quoted a minister from the government.
One minister out of 32. That's exactly what you're quoting. And there's the extremists, and we are hostage. We as Israelis are hostage of this situation. In addition, it's not the position of the government.
There's a direction of travel, though. But let me. Can we just talk about Gaza for the moment? Only Gaza.
Hold on. I'm so sorry, but there's been a lot that's been said. I need just 1 minute, with your permission and those of my colleagues. May I have your name, please? Martin Olin. Martin. I'd like to give you a story. Would you mind to hear it? I'm a Kuwaiti. When I was 8 years old, Iraq invaded my country for reasons I did not understand. There were women who were slaughtered right in front of me. I lived trauma for many years of my life. My parents, because my grandmother was at the time, she's passed away since then, at the time, she had to stay in Kuwait because my grandfather had passed away, and in Muslim heritage, or in Muslim sort of jurisprudence, a widow has to stay in her place for about 4 months, so they couldn't leave. So they had to push us out of the country. And for years, we didn't understand why our Arab counterparts would not allow us to be unyielding when it came to the threat that Iraq posed to Kuwait. In 2003, when the United States wanted to invade Iraq, and that's the country that led a coalition to liberate mine, I took to the streets to say, not in my name. There is a very important benchmark between saying, my suffering does not mean others need to suffer as well. In fact, your suffering should give you a higher ground. Hold on. Should give you a higher ground to say, I know what this goes through. As a Jewish person, you went through the most difficult and horrific situation that anyone can go through, the Holocaust. And we all stood there and said, we're not going to deal with it right now. And then we all came together as the world, and Ralph Limkin, who actually came up with the word genocide, which, by the way, does not mean mass killing, which we seem to be equating with right now, and said, we're not going to do this again. I hold Israel to one standard, the one it holds itself to. It claims to be the only democracy in the Middle East, and I will take it as face value. I will not debate it. And if that's the case, then all humans are equal. And I'm saying that we all need to come and transcend that. It's very important for me to say, I feel your suffering, but at the same time, your suffering, in my view, is not higher than a Palestinian's or anybody else. Human suffering is human suffering, period.
Martin, please.
I was born in a DP camp. My parents survived the Holocaust. I lost family in the Holocaust. Do you understand what that means? You do, because you went through something similar. So let me explain it to you this way. Let me finish.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Simply put, I went through the Holocaust. My parents had dreams all the time.
Are you yourself a survivor?
No,
I'm sorry.
I was born in a DP camp.
Okay.
To give you analysis.
Understood.
A displaced persons camp.
Yeah.
Now, we created Israel, perhaps as a result of that. We lived the dream of 2,000 years of going back to Israel for the first time. And we were in Israel. And when people chant from the river to the sea, and when people have no place for Israel on the map, what do you think should happen? Do you think that that is appropriate? Do you think that it's fair? Let me finish.
No, I don't. Hold on. You're putting words in my... No, don't do that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying your right to a nation is equal, in my view, to a Palestinian's right to a nation. Your right to a nation does not mean that they should not have their own. Let's be clear. Whether you're talking to the Saudis, whether you're talking to the Bahrainis, whether you're talking to the Kuwaitis or anybody else that's coming in the Middle East, long gone are the days where we're saying there is no long Israel. Hold on. Hold on. This is very important. If we're going to have a debate about an existential zero-sum solution, there's no common ground to speak. This is critical. There is no one, I don't think anyone here, I can speak confidently for everyone here, that's saying that that there is no right to Israel to exist.
Everyone is saying
Hold on.
Have you seen the demonstrations?
Hold on.
In the world?
What they're saying is the following. What they're saying is we don't agree that what is going on with Gaza is acceptable. What we believe is, hold on. Listen.
Wait a minute. Now look, I'm going to...
Okay, we're going to stop here. But I think... This is correct.
All right,
Thank you.
Right.
No, it is for the future. Because we cannot make the same mistakes we've made
heard
before.
both sides.
Nick, can I make a comment?
Please, the panelists should comment on this, not an interference.
Nick,
I think this guy
somebody's
Indeed.
We hear them.
I'm just telling you that we have about 20 minutes to run, and I want to put other issues on the agenda in addition to what we've just been hearing. You want to come in?
Yes, I'm Anand Singh. I'm a filmmaker from South Africa. This conversation brings me back to when we were ready for anarchy in South Africa, ready to go and fight and have a total disaster. And
which years are you talking about?
So I'm talking about the early 80s, early to mid 80s. And when Nelson Mandela came out of prison and he put everybody together, and they didn't want to, the ANC didn't want to negotiate. And he said, you cannot let them live in fear or hate us or us hate them as much as they hated us. And he said, we've got to forgive and bring together people. And that's how we achieved our peaceful democracy. And I think the whole agenda of whatever is going on here, and you interviewed Mandela, so you know how that played out.
I'm going to have to tell you, we've got 4 minutes left. I've just been given a bit of paper. So what I'd like to do is ask the panelists about particularly, and literally in 45 seconds each, literally what the way ahead is for Gaza with the incredible humanitarian catastrophe that's unfolding there. How can that be managed as part of a process to create stability at some point?
I'll start. Number one, let Qatar and Egypt release the prisoners versus prisoners, number one.
That doesn't provide homes.
I'm coming, number two. Number two, have a new PA government from technocrat in charge of Gaza. Number three, work with the international community and the United States to get quickly all the humanitarian aid into Gaza.
Eric.
I actually agree that number one, we've got to, we've got to make sure that we release the hostages. that number two, we've got to make sure there's adequate humanitarian aid for the innocent Palestinians that are suffering under this, for sure. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. And I think, again, just as the Biden administration, if any of you know my background, I'm not on that side of the political aisle, but I support its statement that we need to see a revamped and revitalized Palestinian leadership that does not condone terrorism, that does not incite violence, and is not corrupt. So I think we've got a lot of agreement here.
Given what you correctly said to me about what I put on the agenda, about people in Gaza having to find somewhere else to live.
No.
What quoting one minister, what do you think could be a solution with a humanitarian catastrophe with 2.3 million people needing 500 trucks a day and nowhere to live?
Okay. When a business gets into trouble, you appoint a receiver. Gaza needs a receiver because the local government, what I was trying, my message was the local community, people of Israel and Egypt and Palestine do not have the ability to fix the situation. We need a receiver to come in and fix. I agree with Eric and Summer that someone from the outside to fix the situation, take care of the hostages, take care of the humanitarian disaster, and then start negotiating a peace process.
The debate has been heated. The options are various. I'm sorry to have to bring this to a close, but the time is, as you can see, we've reached the end. And we've reached the end after a very compressed hour and a half on critical issues. But I did say right at the beginning, we were unlikely to find anything which would signal a definite way forward. And sadly, I think that's where we've got to, as I have to bring this to an end.
Followed the money. Nobody here followed the money.
We only have a limited amount of time.
If I may. I think it's a good question, but I think let me just, since we have the 45 seconds each, because we've not taken it, let me take my 45 seconds. I mean, I'm not a Palestinian, I'm not an Israeli. I think it's in the hands of the Palestinians, it's in the hands of Israelis. And I think when I say in the hands of Israelis and Palestinians, and I'm talking to my Israeli friends and Jewish friends, keep your main client out of it, which is the United States. Because we're not going to get together into a real peace situation if we're going to bring the player, which is basically allowing the arrogance of occupation to carry on. Because I've seen the occupation in this place, and it's a tough occupation to be in. So you need that out, and I think the Palestinians and the Israelis will see the path, because one-state solution is not going to work, although in reality, that's the solution in hand, but that's not going to give the Jewish state that everybody wants. So it's got to be two-state solution. Two-state solution is not the jerky work done by the deal of the century, madness. It's got to be a real deal which keeps the dignity and integrity of the Palestinians in hand along with the Israelis. So I think that is what we've got to work on. But as the point you said, day one starts. I agree. I think you said it better than all of us. It is prisoners for prisoners, or hostages for prisoners, whatever you want to call it, in order that we go forward. Because we're just going to carry on saying hostages and without giving anything on the other side, nothing's going to work. So we got to stop this 220 people dying every day, of which basically 70% are children and women. I think that is the most important that we got to start. I agree. The weaponry is coming wherever it's coming from. I think even from a U.S. perspective, because the issue is the elusive lack of leadership. We've had lack of leadership in the past 70 years to really look into this and go forward. Not only, and I think it was you when you said we got to look into. I mean, as an Arab, I cannot blame the Americans and the Israelis and the poodles of the United States and Europe to do what's happening. Actually, part and major problem is us, the Arabs. When you say the only democracy in the region, okay, then we look at, our moderate states are regimes which are not democratic, but we go with them. So again, that is a contradiction in terms from the US perspective more than anybody else. So I think to go forward, we got to stop what's going on and actually sit together, Palestinians and Israelis, and not the rest of the world.
Khalid Jinahi, thank you. We've at least tried to chart some options. None of them look likely to be positive in the near future. Thank you to you all for your contributions. I'm sorry for those who couldn't contribute, but we've aired an enormous number.
Thank you.
Well done. Well done, young man.
Folks, we have another panel starting immediately, so we do ask if you want to converse, you head upstairs to our networking area. The panelists will be available up there as well, too. If you want to converse, please head upstairs.